All right, I want to thank everybody for coming to the 14th Annual Portland Retro Gaming Expo. I am the Immortal John Hancock.
Yes.
I want to thank everybody for taking time out of their busy day, an exhausting day, and thrift-finding game time to come here and hear me talk. Today is going to be a mixture. Before I start, I'm with my good friend Eric Jensen.
Hello.
Eric Jensen, and we'll have some news. Eric Jensen is the founder of 64 Bits or Less. And you want to talk about that real quick?
So it's an outdoor retro gaming festival that we do down in Corvallis every year. It's called 64 Bits or Less, so it is obviously focused on consoles from those generations. And it's not an expo, it's not a convention, there's no vending, there's no sales. It's a big party for everyone to actually sit and play together.
Drinks, alcoholic,
yeah,
and
there's food,
non.
There's food, there's drinks.
Yeah.
It runs into the night. There's a projector. There's
Camping.
a shooting gun, light gun gallery. So we set up little living rooms all over the space, basically.
I did a video on it, and so
Yeah.
I had an absolute blast. He invited me down. One thing I like about Eric and why we're friends is his passion for games. And today, I'm going to do a little bit of a Q&A. I'm going to talk about collecting Sega. Who collects Sega here? Anybody? Couple, all right, sweet. Talk about the differences of collecting Sega versus collecting something else. And just talk about kind of future plans a little bit. Yeah. So I'll jump right in. If you haven't checked out the Genesis collection, please do so. It is a passion of mine. In the museum, I've been collecting Sega Genesis since '89, and so I got a Genesis with Altered Beast. It was with my own money. The story goes is that I actually didn't want a Sega Genesis. I wanted a Neo Geo, and I saw that. Who remembers the Sears Wish book?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. And so looking at those back in the day, and I wanted a Neo Geo. I drooled over the graphics. I said, and then I remember telling myself this: the graphics can't get any better. Oh, it's like, who's done that? Who's seen like games back in the day and be like, oh my gosh, this is it. It can't get better than this. And so I was really just fascinated with like Magician Lord and some of those early Neo Geo titles. Oh my gosh, how do they do that? And I didn't understand the graphics processor and the sound and all that. And so I really wanted one. And then I saw the price and I went to my dad. I was so proud. And I thought, my dad's really going to encourage me. And maybe if I'm just well behaved, he'll get me a Neo Geo. And I went up to him and he goes, I said, Dad, I really want this. And I looked in the Sears Wish book and he says, that's great, son. You see that lawnmower over there? Yeah. That's how you're going to get it. And it was actually the best thing for me because it drove me to work hard for what I have. And I've always applied that to my life. I've always typically worked 2 jobs. I worked really hard for what I have, and I worked really hard, and I earned about $200 at the end of summer. I did about 3 months of waxing cards. Everything I did for free stopped. If you want the trash out, 50 cents. You cut the wood, that's gonna be $1. And it was like, and so I was fairly young still, and I saved up enough money to get a Sega Genesis with the Altered Beast pack-in. That's why I wear this hat. It was my first game I played. Not the best game. It was a pack-in game, definitely. But at the time, when you earn it with your own money, guess what? You play that mediocre game through to the end. You beat it. You don't tell your parents that you beat it on the 3rd day you got it. Okay. And if you earned it with your own money, you just keep playing it. But I was fascinated with Sega early on. What was your first? So that was one of my memories, really, with Sega and being proud. What was one of your memories with Sega? Just collecting Sega.
All of my earliest Sega memories of the Master System. It was the first console I had in my house, and aunt and uncle bought it for us for Christmas. And the rest really was history.
Favorite games? You have favorite games?
Favorite games: Fantasy Zone. I like the Alex Kidd games.
Oh, okay.
R-Type.
Yeah.
An endless amount. Cloudmaster. That's the other one. Cloudmaster. Yeah, and it was just something that brought the family together. I mean, literally, we played that thing as a family, and it was, definitely what started my actual, love of video games. So Sega is very close to my heart because of that.
And it's very different than other consoles or companies because Sega really focuses on arcade-style gameplay. There's classics out there. The Phantasy Star on Master System blew my mind. In fact, Phantasy Star is considered one of the better 8-bit role-playing games. I'm never going to say the best because there'll always be someone out there, oh, what about this? But Phantasy Star really put what Sega could do on a console. To me, really, that was a game that just blew my mind. I played Phantasy Star forever. And I didn't play it till after in the 90s when I got a Master System 2. I really didn't have a Master System growing up. I had a Nintendo and then a Sega. I kind of had your standard progression. Nintendo, Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo, et cetera, et cetera. But Master System was kind of on the side. But, it kind of goes with collecting. Who's heard of what some people call the Nintendo tax? Who's heard of that? The Nintendo tax, yeah. And so for people that don't know, the Nintendo tax is if it's made by Nintendo, guess what? You're going to pay more. You're going to pay more because the majority, especially being in the Northwest, there's an extra concentration of Nintendo fans. You go more Midwest, East Coast, it gets a little bit more varied. And that's what I've experienced on my trips to retro game cons. But, for me, Sega really catered to a different audience. I found over my journeys that a lot of people who anybody grew up with Atari? All right, a lot of fans. So, and like I said, we'll open this up to Q&A a little bit later, but I feel like Sega was really catering more to Atari fans, and especially more edgier. They're older population, grittier. They're the games that sometimes Nintendo didn't want to take a chance on. And so sometimes, they weren't fully polished either. There was a lot of games on the Sega Genesis library that are a little rough, but they were game concepts that weren't made on Nintendo. And so it really appealed to me. Some of my favorite Sega Genesis games, Ghouls and Ghosts. Oh my gosh, I'm totally messing up. Oh my gosh, Ghouls and Ghosts. Ghouls and Ghosts being the arcade conversion, one of the best known ports of it. There's a super graphics version, which is amazing, but we didn't get that in the States. And I played that over and over and over again. In fact, I play it every year. Halloween's coming up, and I'm trying to play it on that. And Ghouls and Ghosts is just an amazing game. You have to beat it twice to get the true ending, and you have to get the magical weapon, and it's just fantastic. Revenge of Shinobi, another classic. Streets of Rage 2. Sonic 2, which is one of my favorite games. It's a good and cheap 2-player game. Fantastic. Columns, I was joking with him earlier. It's like, Sega ought to really do like a columns tournament. Like for the classic columns.
The world columns.
I mean, it could be kind of like a parody of like how huge Tetris is, but columns was great. It was different than Tetris, but it really is a fun puzzle game. And so those are the types of games I really enjoyed about Sega Genesis. And we discussed this earlier that you deal with what you have even if you know it's not the best. When you grow up and you have a system that doesn't have everything or starts to show its age, guess what? If you're a kid, you deal with it. You pray that they don't discontinue that console. And you hunt, and if you go to a rental store and there's 20 games, that's the only 20 games that you have to select from, guess what? You're satisfied with what you get, and you appreciate it. And that's how it was with Genesis.
Yeah, you learn to love that game.
Yeah. Yeah. And you don't dare tell your parents if you beat it early, especially if you beat a game on the same day they purchase it for you. So luckily I didn't have to deal with that much. My parents were fairly conservative with buying gifts and stuff, and so it probably kind of helped make me into who I am. They didn't buy sugar cereals. We typically had a very modest Christmas, one gift and maybe a clothes item, and that's it. But it wasn't because of money. They just didn't believe in giving a lot of gifts. So that was it, and I was okay with that. So, anyways, I'm do a little bit talk a little bit about Q&A about YouTube. and just touch on the end of kind of like moving forward from here. My Sega Genesis collection, I'll just talk a little bit about that, and then open it up to anything you want to add after that. Okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been collecting Sega for since '89, and really Sega Genesis was the one that got me interested. I was fairly young, in middle school at the time, and so having my Genesis collection on display is just the start, and it means a lot to me that people came up and looked at it. It's taken a long time to put together. It took about 20 years to put together. I've had it complete for about 10. And maybe a little bit less than that, but I've upgraded some. I did a video about upgrading some of my Genesis games over time.
You bought another one today.
Who wants to see it? All right. Okay. Well, this is like down the rabbit hole of collecting, so let's talk about this, okay? And so it's just a box, and you look at it and it's like, well, big deal, right? It's a big deal to me.
Yeah.
So my Sega Classic collection looks great like this, but it's sun faded on the edge. I hate sun fade. I hate sun fade. It bothers me, and I have to let some of it go, but part of it is it just happens. Genesis games typically were in rental stores, and they were sun faded. A lot of flea marts. The sun being exposed to this really flimsy artwork will fade over time. It's really hard to find very dark yellows on the spines of Sega Classic games. So, of course, of all my sun-faded games, almost all my Sega Classic games are sun-faded. I'm like, "Argh!" But anyways, I got it for $2. Anyways, that's...
And, this one's got the hang tab.
Yeah, oh, the hang tab. So, thank you for bringing it up. So, a lot of people, who remembers this, like this bothered them, or they ripped it off, or, that happens, right? And so...
The rental stores would just cut
them
right
yeah.
away. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because, they didn't fit. You'd have to fold it down. And then what's worse is if you don't cut this right or tear it off right, it's sharp. And I've cut my fingers on those and all sorts of stuff. Blood and sweat came to the Sega Genesis collection. And so, finding, and the thing that's important, I will not try to ever piecemeal if I can get away with it. So if I had a missing hang tab on a Genesis game, I would purchase that game to get the hang tab. I wouldn't buy another game.
Yeah, complete.
Yeah, and I would really try to match it and have it as authentic as possible. Because most people don't care, and that's fine. Many people say, well, why don't you just go to cover art and print it off? And it's like, that's not why I collect.
Yeah, that's not preserving anything.
No. No, and so, to me, having my Genesis collection faced out, complete, tells a story with the art. The artists who were involved with making that artwork, or people seeing that game case and they go back to their childhood. I remember playing that. I remember getting destroyed by my brother or sister. Or, I hated that game. I loved that game. I cried playing that game. People have a lot of memories, and that's why I do it. It's really just connecting and showing, hey, this is all the games that came out in Sega. I can't tell you how many people came up to me and said, that came out on Sega? Well, there it is. So yeah. So I'm going to open this up to Q&A, and we'll do some other things too. But questions, you can just, we're a small enough audience, you can just shout it out. Any questions about collecting Sega, collecting in general, YouTube, etc.? Yes?
I've just got a question in regards to what is your opinion on, as collectors, this movement towards people treating the industry as an investment? Just what is your personal take on that?
Well, when things get mainstream, okay, and this happens in almost any industry, it starts off as just a hobbyist thing where people are getting into it because it's cheap, it's affordable. I know that's, for me, I was a poor college student. I was eating ramen, I was freezing McDonald's cheeseburgers when they were 29 cents, putting them in a freezer, buying the Max, those signs when you go to McDonald's and it says Max 21? Those are made because of people like me. I froze them in the freezer and I lived on that. And because I chose to spend my money, on stupid stuff, food, and video games and, you know, maybe a little bit of beer. And, you know, so, you know, it wasn't about making money. And it really wasn't making about money for anybody. What happens, though, is demand pops up. People start saying, boy, we should have this or we should have that. And then other people with the availability to create things or hunt and search provide that service for people that want it. And then what happens? It gets bigger. And then more people see that, oh, that's fun, I want to do that, I want to do that. And then other people on the side say, oh, I can make money doing this. And so what I have found over time, because, you know, I've been in this industry, I've been part of the retro gaming scene for a long time, is you just kind of have to make it your own. There's going to always be people out there that it's an investment. There's always going to be people out there that it's different to them. It's about making money or it's not. And you just have to say, well, it's this for me, and try not to judge others for that. It's hard. I've done it. You know, when VGA first came out, I hated it. You know, we want to talk about controversy. You know, putting a game in a coffin for future investment. And I don't have any graded games in my collection. And I'm nothing against WATA, but it's just not why I collect. You know, what if I put WATA games in the Sega Genesis Museum today? That's not my thing. That's not why I do it. And so, for people that do that, okay, not my thing. You know, wish you well, you know. But the problem is it just takes one thing in that company, or if a controversy or something happens, and then what? You have your game in a coffin. Like, look at all the VGA games now. I mean, that's like poison, you know. And they found, by the way, that you can get those out of the case. That's what killed them. And so all those sealed, graded games didn't seem as cool anymore. So nothing against them. It's just, yeah.
I do think we're in a collecting bubble right now, too, that will eventually pop. I mean, who's retiring on their Beanie Babies, right? And we all, you know, thought that was an investment, and obviously
Pogs.
wasn't.
Yeah.
Pogs, yeah. And there's stuff like, you know, the Buck Rogers toy set that was worth a whole lot of money just a little while ago, and now those people aren't collecting it anymore, and it's really not worth anything. I don't think video games will follow that path, because video games are still currently bigger than movies and music combined, the industry. So the history of this will always be something that will always be sought after. But do I think, if people are looking at the prices of games now and thinking they're going to be worth way more way down the line, I don't personally think that's going to pan out for them.
Well, and I think the problem too is now you have an entire generation of people that grow up not caring about physical media. So at some point it's going to be, I know, right? Yeah, I know. Good seeing you, by the way. So, yeah. So I think the challenge is that there's always going to be people liking video games. Always going to be people use video games and having conventions. But there's just kind of that. It's just going to happen. You know, I envision myself, I joke, people laugh when I tell this analogy, but I see myself like trains, like HO scale train fanatics. You know, being that old guy, still energetic about old video games, in a small group setting, talking and sharing my passion for video games. I don't care if it's 5 people, 10 people, 100 people. You know, I don't really get caught up into that. And I think sometimes people get caught up into the investment of the games, and they kind of, it becomes like a thing, you know, like anything. But I just try not to have it affect my purpose and focus, and just, yeah. Does that answer your question? That was a long answer.
No, it does.
All right.
I mean, there's a New York Times or Washington Post, I can't remember, where a guy flew out to Florida, spent $1 million on 40 games.
Yeah.
And that was just, to me, that's just astronomical. That's unheard of.
That's a little much.
Well, and then you see that. It's going to happen where you're going to have millionaires, a small percentage of people affect the market. But what happens when they get bored and move on? You know, it'll affect the market. It will.
They don't get bored.
Well, yeah, they get bored with their money because they don't know what to do with it.
Well, okay, since you brought that up,
same guy offered you that $1 million for your collection,
Yeah.
would you take it?
No. No. I mean, I've been offered money. I got offered money for my Genesis collection. The answer is no. Because I want to do something with my collection. And
The collection is spoken for. It is
Yeah.
going to be preserved and presented to the public
Yeah.
in a museum setting. That's
yeah.
the plan for
Yeah.
the whole thing.
And that's taken a long time, just to add to that. It's taken a long time because I never said it was going to be tomorrow. And a lot of people forget the National Video Game Museum took 10 years to set up. So there's people out there that want it tomorrow. It doesn't happen like that. Never was supposed to happen like that. It's not going to happen like that. And it's kind of a long-term plan. Eric Jensen actually is a board member of the Future Nonprofit. That's why he's here.
Yeah, so the ball is rolling. The details are obviously necessarily private right now, but the paperwork for the nonprofit is being gone through. The board is set up. Lawyers are being hired. It's going to take time. We all have jobs. We all have other stuff and families, and constant commitments, but it's happening.
Yeah. I teach. Thank you. Thank you. By the way, and the other thing is that PRGE is connected to that board. So, Rick Wise is on that board. I'm very connected to people in the gaming community, and I have the support of them, and that's that. And so it's going to take a long time, and it never was a tomorrow plan. There's so many things to iron out, and that's it. I mean, in the meantime, having my Genesis collection or have my game collection. Who saw my Nintendo collection last year?
Yes.
Yeah, you like that. Well, the intent is to bring it back, but the challenge is, so those acrylic cases that my collection's in this year, that's $6,000.
Each, right?
No.
Oh, no.
No, but it's $6,000 to have that on display, and they crack and they break and they age, and so that's just a small, in space and transportation, and I had 60 days to get my Genesis collection for the show. I kind of was freaking out a little bit. It was fun though. It was fun. But yeah, I have some great plans. This is just the beginning. And, we'll see. What's next year? I'd like to do more Sega, of course. I'm always going to want to do more Sega. But I want to bring Nintendo back, because I have a whole Nintendo set one year, and that's not really fair.
Let's do Vectrex next year.
I could do it. Just have to be displayed and just right. I have a complete Vectrex basic set. I have to say basics. I don't have Mr. Boston. I don't have a Mindstorm team. But there's always those people out there. You don't have that. And it's like, oh, come on. You do it then. No. So yeah. Right?
Yeah.
That's Angry John. So, we got time for questions, and happy to. Okay, I saw your hand, and I'll get to you. Yes.
What's the next console you're going to be completing a set for?
The focus, that at this time is winding down, because I think that gets in the way of moving to do with what the collection in general. I don't really need to climb any more mountains with that, and I think the more that I focus on that, the more it's actually kind of slowed me down, because I completed several sets this last year. That's cool. I've climbed any mountain I wanted to, and I'm really out of space. I'd like to complete my 3DO. I'd like to complete Greatest Hits GameCube. I'm really kind of want to focus on those subsets, but for major stuff, I don't know, I've climbed any mountain. I really need to do something with it in general, and I want to do that. It's just going to take some time. So that's my emphasis. Though I want to do more, like Xbox. I want to complete original Xbox. I want to complete PlayStation. Where in the heck am I going to put it right now?
Yeah, he does not have room for one more thing.
And so that's kind of an upgrade. I want to upgrade some boxes, but focusing on that makes it more challenging moving forward. It's actually been kind of a problem, among some other things. There's been some personal issues in my life this last year that's made things tough. So yeah. Yes, sir. One more, and the gentleman in the front.
I went down and looked at your games in the museum, and it's like 4 Bible games, Joshua and...
Yes.
What church put those out?
Well, it's a company. So, and I don't know so the short answer is that started off as another company. And they weren't licensed. They weren't licensed, and they know. And so what happened was they started churning out Christian games because it would be controversial if Nintendo went after them because it was kind of a conservative area. And so they did. They changed from bunch games, or it was Color Dreams, and it evolved into Wisdom Tree, and is to protect themselves against the mighty Nintendo. And of course, Sega's got the, come over here, come make games for us. We'll take it. We'll love you. Really, Sega was really an alternative to the might of Nintendo. In fact, at first, nobody wanted to make games for Sega because of the fear of Nintendo. And as time went on, more and more companies are like, we're getting screwed here. And Sega's like, come on over here, we'll treat you better. In fact, the other irony too, that's how PlayStation beat Nintendo. Because they were offering better licensing deals, with the PlayStation versus Nintendo 64. And so, does that answer it? So the four games were 16.
I've never seen it.
Yeah, they're
50 made?
Yeah, no, they're more than that, and but they're more purchased for Nintendo Entertainment System. It was like I grew up in a conservative area, and everybody had the Bible games, and all the kids hated it. Okay,
They are terrible.
But here's the thing, though: if you tell your family, your family then looks at Nintendo as wholesome. They look at it as like, oh, they make good children's games. Okay, and then the kid can ask for maybe a little more mature game, but really Sega was good for that. Sega was like kind of the black sheep, and it was like, we have the grittier games, and they did. Mortal Kombat 2, I'll never forget that. Mortal Kombat 2 was brutal, and blood, the blood and all that. And I felt a little dirty playing it, but felt good about it. So yeah. Other questions? Back there, yes, sir.
I noticed you had one game in your collection that wasn't in a box. I wonder if that's like a promo, one-off kind of thing.
Miracle, I saw that one.
I didn't know what it was. And then my other question was, since the Genesis games came in the clamshell, is it just considered like a no-brainer that you would always collect in box versus say like Super Nintendo, which can be a lot harder to find the box version?
Yes, I can answer both those. So, of course he knows the one that's not in the box. Just joking. I know, I'm razzing it. Okay. So you're talking about Miracle Piano?
Yeah.
Okay, Miracle Piano didn't have its own box. It came in a fat, huge box that was a keyboard with a stand, and this company made it for a computer, they made it for Nintendo, and really it was a program where it's going to teach you to learn to play piano. Every grandma out there at the time was like, oh, this is going to make them a beautiful player, and it was like a couple $100 or something. There's some great videos about that. And so it didn't come in a clamshell. It came in a cart, and the manual doesn't fit in this. It's for the system. And so when I purchased mine off eBay years ago, I don't know if you've ever had to deal with this. So you're excited, you get a good deal on something, and how do they send it? They use the box itself as a shipping box. And I was so mad, but it's pretty hard to get. The Genesis version, all it is it's got a sticker on it that says Sega Genesis, and the internals are the foam's a little bit different, I think. But it has, a Genesis card in it, but yeah. And they go back to Super Nintendo is the reason. So yes, my Super Nintendo collection suffered because I focused on Sega Genesis, because A, was considerably cheaper because it's the Nintendo tax, going back to that Nintendo tax. Really, I never pursued a complete in-box Super Nintendo set. There's other people that have that, and it's gorgeous and it's great, and thumbs up to you. But you're going to pay a premium because 10 people are going to want that same game at any given time.
Specifically, my question was, is it much harder to find the Super Nintendos in the boxes because the Genesis games are in a clamshell?
Yes, and that Super Nintendo box shows every scuff, every nick, and honestly, it's kind of boring. Super Nintendo boxes are kind of boring to me.
American ones aren't very
Yeah, of course, yeah.
It just made the R2 small.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to me, that's just not that's not, like, even though I grew up with Super Nintendo, always loved, like, the Sega Genesis collection faced out. It's like a movie selection, different colors, and it was great. And it's so funny too, because the stigma with Sega Genesis. I had this hat around a family member on my wife's side, and he was staring at my hat. And he's staring at it like, he's kind of like giving me the stink eye a little bit. And I'm like, what? And he's like, your hat's kind of evil. and it was like, but it was that was kind of the stigma. But like Sega Genesis was, even with its cover art, was gritty. They had some awesome imagery on their games. All different colors. I love that. Yeah.
But definitely people didn't throw these out in the same numbers that, Nintendo boxes, half the people got the game and threw the box out that day.
And what happens with these over time, you open them up and you hear the crack. They crack. They get brittle. If the artwork is not perfectly aligned to the box, it'll get wear there. You'll get rips. If someone takes it out and doesn't put it back in just right, it'll wrinkle, it'll tear. There's all a bunch of things that can happen to it. I try not to obsess about it, but as you can tell, I obsess about it.
I don't see you trying that hard.
Yeah. Other questions? Yes.
What was your favorite Genesis game to purchase, and any backstory on purchasing that specific game?
Well, I'll talk about, I haven't talked about Herzog's Vi yet, have I? Okay, so Herzog's Vi was a real-time strategy game for Genesis. Classic Game Room did like a 5-part video on it. He's a longtime YouTuber, and it's a great game. I didn't purchase it, but my mom got it for $20, and she actually thought it was a Transformers game. She saw a robot on it. Oh, it's got smoke and war, and she's like, that's going to be a good game. I think you're going to like it. And I ended up loving it. $20, she got it at KB Toys, and it didn't sell well. It was just kind of came sneezed out, but it's actually fairly valuable now. And not super valuable, but it's a wonderful game. I played it with my brother. And who's played that game? Herzog's Vi. Anybody play it? Oh, we got one hand. Okay. So, Herzog's Vi, Z-W-E-I. It's German, I think. Herzog's Vi. And am I saying it right? Vi. Okay. So, it's a real-time strategy game in which you look like a Jetfire the Transformer. And you can transform into a robot, and your goal is to secure other bases. And you can't directly attack other bases. You have to have your armies that you manufacture and attack the other base. It plays like nothing else at the time, and it's proof that a console can make a real-time strategy game and it works. And you can play the computer or you can play an opponent. There's lots of different ways to play it. It's fantastic. It's still fun to play. So hands down, Herzog's Vi is one of those games. I talked about Ghouls and Ghosts. I talked about Streets of Rage 2. I still play those. Those are like some of my great gaming memories, games I play every year. So those are the games I try to go back to the library and play. But I do play the Genesis. I have an analog system, the Mega SG, and that's a field programmable gate array. Long story short, it essentially plays Genesis games on modern televisions near to perfection. Not perfect, but near to perfection. And that's what I play on, and I still play it, and something that's near and dear to me. The other cool thing about the Mega SG is that it's compatible with the Sega CD adapter, and so you can play your Sega CD games on modern television. Dark Wizard being one of my favorite Sega CD games, but finding the 100 hours to beat it has been challenging. Other questions? Yes?
Have you ever bought a game thinking that it was legit, but then inside the cartridge is a bootleg board?
Not with Sega, but yes. So the challenge is, so the Sega Genesis, I'll just use this as an example. This is easy to print. This is super easy to print and make duplicates of. And people do that. And what you have to do is you have to get really good at the consistency of paper, okay? I can feel it and close my eyes and say that's real, okay? The grid, the early black grid Sega Genesis games are thinner in consistency than later games, okay? The nice thing about the cardboard box games is that they're harder to duplicate. The inserts are often aftermarket, though. If you have a really nice insert, it may be an aftermarket, and those are sold on eBay. And so it's tougher. PRGE, with the work, they worked with us and Callets Gamers to come up with a pretty strict reproduction policy. And that's really important moving forward. As time moves forward, you will find more bootlegs. There's a lot of aftermarket stuff out there. Typically, if you find a game complete, it is original. And when you're not getting a manual and stuff, that's sometimes tough online to whether or not it's real or not. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
So no, not really. I've gotten pretty good about it. I've bought in other things, it ended up being a bootleg, but it wasn't Sega Genesis. It was Master System, actually. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, but the guy forgot to tell me it was cheap, so he wasn't lying. And then I went home, I said, oh, this is aftermarket. He said, oh yeah, do you want your money back? Okay. It wasn't a big deal. He wasn't trying to scam me, he didn't tell me. It was really cheap though, it was like a couple bucks, so it's like, oh, okay. Yeah.
I'd like to hear about the 2 Blockbuster carts.
Oh, yeah. Does anybody see those in the museum? The Game Factory? Okay. Yeah, so Game Factory was a service in which you could download games from a select amount of games. I don't even know like the whole history of it, but it was the rollout, and you could essentially have any select amount of Genesis games on like a flash card, and all of them are blank. All the Game Factory games found, I think, are blank. There was another company called Leaf or something, and there's a couple games out there that have been actually found on it, and so that's an interesting. I put them in the collection because they were from Blockbuster, which is interesting. And there's 2 different color variations. I think there was another color, but it wasn't officially released, and so yeah. I don't know if it was supposed to roll out and folded, but yeah, that's the service.
Were the color variations different boards or different sizes? Yeah.
Possibly.
Okay.
No idea. That's good question. I've had them in my collection a long time. I know about the service, but I don't know specifically. It makes sense. That makes sense, but I don't know.
That was my only thought on it, yeah.
Yeah. That's a good question. Anything else? Yes?
What's a major collecting pet peeve of yours?
Major collecting pet peeve. I have a few. I have a few. I think judging others on how they collect. I think when someone collects and then, or maybe like someone else says, oh, do you play all your games? Absolutely not. That's not why I collect. And being judged by someone just because they play their games, or don't. If someone wants to put it on a shelf and admire it and have a memory of it, great. I won't judge you for it. Don't judge me for having a complete collection. Don't judge me for not starting a museum tomorrow. Yeah. Does that help? Oh, other pet peeves. I think the challenge is that sometimes collecting has become like a status quo, like a status system, like a status, and so people may be driven to just get the high-end stuff because it's like they want it to be worth a lot of money and they want to share that. And there's nothing wrong with that, but sometimes that's the problem because there's a lot of games out there that aren't worth a lot, that are great, that aren't appreciated, but because they're not expensive, nobody cares. Right? There's a lot of sports games like that. And Genesis is a good example of that, a great library that, a lot of people don't really care about it because it's common or no, it's funny. There's a lot of games out there, and so that in itself is an issue, but I don't know. I'll be around to, pick up the slack when it comes to appreciating just everything, or as much as possible. Other pet peeves. You have pet peeves?
I think personally, there's a lot of different ways to collect, and pet peeves are going to come up for everybody, and you have to find your way around them. You have to find the thing that works for you. Something that does still annoy me is when people don't have prices or won't give you a price. And
One moment, I'm going to look up eBay the price. I'm so
Exactly.
sorry that I didn't have
Exactly.
any time to prepare.
yes,
I'm going to
yes.
have you wait there. I'm going to
Yep.
look this up.
And there's
by the
10
way,
people behind me too who.
And by the way, I'm going to look up this price, and I think I should add a couple dollars because you're not paying shipping. So, it's the same exact price. I'm going to charge you the same exact price as this eBay price. And then it's like, wait a minute, wait. You're not getting 20% of that or 15% of that. I'm
Yeah.
right here in front of you.
Yeah.
And so,
And I think the eBay prices thing too, it's a little less true somewhere here where there are tons of people selling games and tons of people coming for it, even all over the country. But when people try and put an eBay price on something in like a thrift store or something like that, you don't have the whole country looking at your stuff.
yeah.
You've got a small group of people in your town.
Yeah.
Stop trying to make eBay prices off it.
And there's there's a middle, like have the lights on. I get that booths are expensive. I get that. One thing I've actually found, there's been some great prices on Genesis, especially Sega stuff. Everybody find some good deals today? Yeah!
$5 for risk.
Oh, nice. That's a great game. You know what's cool about that is like sometimes the game will be cheap because it's a board game or a sports game. Don't tell them it's good. Okay? Say, oh no, that's just a board game. No, that's not good. $5? Oh, okay, I'll do that. I'll be the one burdened to purchase this game.
I'll tell you one, so I'm actually putting up against Contra. That's an Atomic Runner.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you have never played it. I didn't see that coming, that game. It's like,
Okay.
wow.
That game starts and it does this.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you're not a good game? Go back to the beginning.
Go back to
Oh, you're getting better at this? Sorry. Go back to the beginning. It's like, you think Ninja Gaiden stuff? No, don't play that game.
I mean, just
Yeah.
get the float, you can flip and turn.
Oh,
around,
it's a
start
great
shooting
game.
Back. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that's a
Pick it up. I mean, I believe it's gonna get really expensive. I know.
it's obscure, and I've brought it up before, but it kind of evolved from something else. But the Atomic Runner for the Genesis is a good version of it, and I think it was an arcade game, and we got like a better version, like an enhanced version, I think. Don't quote me on that. But anyways, that's a great game. It's really weird though. It's a game, and when you play Atomic Runner, it's like a side scroller in which you're flipping. It's like a shooter platform ever runner. Well, I think that would be the best way to describe it.
Jumping, you got to get that right.
Yeah, and if you don't, you're gonna die. And you're gonna die, and you're gonna restart it. Yeah.
I thought I was angry at Mario, but this was
No, that's nothing. That's nothing.
jumping and shooting.
All right. Yes. Other questions? A couple. Yes, sir. We'll start there and go to you.
I know you're the king of Sega and obscurity, so I came to this convention looking for Earthworm in Gen 2.
Okay.
And apparently it's like finding,
Yeah.
Okay.
gold in nowadays somewhere, I don't know.
Yeah, Earthworm Jim 2, it's funny, for such a very, I would say, successful
Yeah.
game, the sequel came out, and the only thing that I could maybe add to that is that as the 90s moved on, it became very fierce and competitive with multiple consoles. And, that's a multi-plat game. I do believe it's on Super Nintendo as well. And so as time went on, I'm sure the production was less. And
Was it a later release?
yeah, and so I don't know exactly what year, but that was kind of at the tail end of AAA titles. Oh, wrap it up? Okay, a couple minutes? All right, 2 minutes, then we can go over and I have something great signed for people as a thank you for coming. So, we'll wrap up a couple more questions. Did they answer your question? I don't know the exact production number of that, but that's why
I just thought it was going to be easy to find. And
yeah, it's not.
And also, McDonald's cheeseburgers were 39 cents. The burger was 29.
Oh,
I just not that, I'm a fat guy, so I gotta respect that.
hey, I stand
I was
corrected.
fat and broke, so I mean,
Yeah,
I'm with
yeah,
it.
I'm part of the fat and broke club back then.
It was actually real meat too, so,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's just, yeah, thank you for correcting me on it. Yeah, the cheeseburgers were 39 cents, yes. And I mostly got the hamburgers, but I wasn't really picky back then, right? Someone came over with a cheeseburger and I didn't have to pay for it. I'm like, yeah. Okay, gentleman in the glasses right here.
With like, so as you were saying, like with thrift stores pricing stuff higher, do you think that we'll see an issue with finding certain things in the future, say like items from Rock Band or things like that, that have greatly ended up in thrift stores, have been priced at an astronomical price, so people are like, I'm not going to buy that from a thrift store, and then it ends up in the dump. You know, I've talked to a couple of people at Goodwill where they basically have taken out trash bags of video games from PS2, PS1. You know, and
That's been happening 30, 40 years.
Yeah, yeah.
With Atari, think about all the prototypes and games that we'll never get because they were thrown in the garbage.
That's true. I feel there's a pretty weird situation we're in right now where people are like really wanting to collect, and so items are going up higher in price, and people are not willing to pay that amount. So I feel like there's a more substantial amount of things that are just going straight, you know, gone. But at the same time, there's also been a lot more production of those things. There's a lot more of those items out there. Yeah, so I don't know. I guess my question is mainly just, do you think we'll have, you know, trouble finding common things?
Yes.
Things will continue to
Yeah,
get destroyed.
it's going to get worse and worse, and eventually it's going to be really hard to find anything. That's what the whole goal of having a complete set is, a timestamp of saying this is what was released. Because eventually it's going to be hard to find or expensive to find, and then what? You know, the ROMs are out there, and that's cool, but it's a different thing to see the case art and that. I'm going to thank everybody for coming. I'm going to do like a group picture, if that's okay, in the middle, me there, and then I'll be able to have something if people want something signed for free. I brought some Lightspan games. I can autograph it and talk to me around the corner. I want to thank everybody for coming. I want to thank Eric Denson here for being a great friend and support. And
Thank you.
all right, let's